So, welcome to Keen on Yoga. How to start this today? It's a very poignant time for us all, a very sad and shocking time for us all. And again, usually quite verbose, as you well know. I'm kind of out of words. So, in honor of Sharathji today, I wanted to read something, a little piece of writing that I put together, which is going to help me get a better grip of my own personal experiences around a time of practicing in Mysore that I don't really ever think I fully processed. All that happened there, for good and for bad. As many of us have been in the room in Mysore, as we have been in the rooms of other practice places, a lot happens. It's a very powerful time, and especially in Mysore, I think, and going over the years. There's just so much emotion, really. And looking back now, I realised that that Sharathji held was a vessel for a lot of that, a projection again, probably for a lot of that, and it wasn't fully reconciled. And not only then are we dealing with just the shock of his untimely passing, but we're also, some of us probably just dealing to try and process everything that happened, and that he was instrumental as a figurehead, as a representative, as a kind of still point that we turned around. And now going forward, I don't know. So don't ask me what's going to happen, because I don't know. I mean, I suppose we'll probably open out on a different landscape. I don't know how that's going to go. I don't want it to end. Obviously, I'm very keen on Ashtanga and everything that Sharath did for it. So let's see. I'm certainly not answering any questions on that as of yet. Anyway, here goes my statement. So Sharath Jois, 1971 to 2024, made him 53, 9 years older than myself. So it's my personal reflection. It's not meant to stand for anything other than that. However, it has helped me to come to terms with the sudden shock of Sharathji's death. And along with it, many of my still unreconciled thoughts and emotions about practicing in Mysore, and my Ashtanga practice, my yoga practice altogether. So here goes I suppose it's an open letter to Sharath, really, and I hope you don't mind me using the first person and addressing him directly. It just somehow felt appropriate that I was writing to him as I wrote this. So I remember the first time I saw you, a skinny young guy in a vest and a lungi beside your grandfather in Brick Lane, London. It was after a workshop, and everyone buzzing around your grandfather after the class as I watched you smiling that faintly distant kind of smile. I was 25, and coincidentally I was working as a chef, actually, in a restaurant opposite the venue. So after dipping in and seeing Pattabhi Jois and Sharath, I went back to work that day, but particularly with a picture of Sharath in my mind. It was always the connection with Sharath for me, his lightness, kind of shyness, the open gaze. And so until I met you in Mysore a few years later, I used to watch the videos on YouTube. I was thinking, was YouTube available back then? But it was. And I watched videos of him practicing, and they would inspire my practice before I started to practice regularly. I really idealized you, Sharath. So when I first met you in Mysore, it was 2007, and the family had recently moved into the new old Shala in Gokulam. It was a time when your grandfather was getting old, and yet you seemed reluctant to take over. Only when he fell asleep counting the class, you'd step in and start taking over. So this was when Pattabhi Jois used to count, and then he'd doze off in his chair, and Sharath would start counting, and then Pattabhi Jois would kind of wake up and start again, and Sharath would totally step back. He was utterly reverential of his grandfather, and then Pattabhi Jois would fall asleep again, and Sharath would step in. It was a funny time around that time. And it didn't seem you wanted to take over either. And people said you wanted to be a wildlife photographer and only came back from university in Bangalore because your mum asked you to. And it was to help your grandfather. Due to Teresa hosting you at Purple Valley, you invited us upstairs that first trip for the privileged coffee upstairs to meet your grandfather. He said only to meet my grandfather, but I wanted to meet him, really. I remember you sitting cross-legged on the balcony talking to one of the workers, and we sat on the sofa, and I was talking to your mum, Saraswati, and your grandfather was walking in and out. Pattabhi Jois back then was kind of a little bit here and there, let's say, and he was kind of wondering. I was looking at Sharath. I didn't really get to speak to him. And that first month in Mysore, I was dissatisfied. I was dissatisfied with you, really, Sharath, as many are on the first time, I think. And it was to become a bit of a theme. I came and went, and I practiced unnoticed, and I wanted to be noticed, of course, and I got no postures, and the only instruction given to me was closing my mouth. Close your mouth when dropping back, which was, to be honest, quite a reasonable instruction while my mouth was open. I left none the wiser, really, to be honest, and generally underwhelmed. The only strange occurrence being that you told me to put my hands through my legs in Garbhasana, and I just had a meniscus operation, a knee surgery, a few months back, and it hadn't really properly healed. But in front of everyone in the lead class, I did what you said, of course. And funnily enough, ever since that point, I never had knee trouble again from that operation. really a strange occurrence. And I know many people have had kind of miraculous healings, and I don't necessarily attribute them to Sharath per se, but the kind of energy that he held for everyone, that he was conducting for everyone through him and the space was very powerful. And he was able to hold that for a period of time. Obviously, maybe it all got too much. So, however, it was when you came to Purple Valley and we were hosting you, Teresa and I, and it was a small group, right? He was only there at Purple Valley with about 25, 30 students of us, and we were just practicing in the room with him like that every day and just around him for the 2 weeks, like he was living there as well. And I finally got the chance to talk to you, Sharath, in person. And mainly you would ask me to make you watermelon juices, to be honest, but I felt honoured to do so. That was the main topic of conversation. Adam, watermelon juice, or sometimes mixed fruit juice. And I was, it was an honour to do that. And but, however, by the end of the retreat, and I was sitting on the terrace, and I remember it was just sitting with Sharath on the kind of sofas by the side of the terrace, and this evening after dinner, and I was talking to him, and just directly, just me and him, and he said, "You could come to Mysore anytime, just turn up. You just have to turn up." I forgot to mention something here, that he always got someone to cook his dinner early, and he had early dinner every night, and it was just carrots and chapatis. And then one night, the guy that was going to be cooking his dinner didn't turn up. I think just completely forgot to cook the dinner. And he didn't have anything. Sharath didn't have any dinner at all. He never mentioned it, never said anything about it. He just didn't have any dinner. It's only carrots. He was like a carrot fry and a chapatis he used to have for dinner. So, anyway, next month I took off for some time. I took off from Goa and the retreat, managing it with Teresa, and I came to Mysore again, and that was a month on my own. And Sharath, you let me in, but then roundly ignored me for the month, really. And I got one posture, the first one of the second series, Pachasana, and that was in the last day or so of my trip. And again, it was underwhelming, and I wanted to be noticed again, and I wanted some kind of relationship, and I didn't really get one. And of course, I felt disappointed with you in the end, and I thought you'd invited me personally. So I decided I might not come back again just to practice primary when, after all, I was doing advanced series, as we all are, I'm doing my advanced practice at home, and then you go to Mysore and it's like, no, we're just doing a primary series. And that was the way it remained a long time. And there's a discrepancy and there's a humbling factor in going and doing that. And maybe definitely there is something to learn. I didn't understand it at the time, and I didn't learn anything at the time. I just felt like I was doing less than I could or should be. And it was frustrating. And it was only really a few years later, and we were in Vancouver by that time. Teresa is Canadian, so we moved to Vancouver. I was teaching there a bit. And Sharath Jois had passed away that year. So maybe it was 2010, I'm thinking. For some reason, we decided we should start going to Mysore. Maybe there was something I felt generally missing in my practice, and it was kind of intangible, but I remember that time in Mysore, and the best way to describe it is I lacked a sense of stability. There's something to do with the vinyasa and the stability and the concentration that I was lacking, and I was getting up and feeling like I was jumping over obstacles, like I'm doing an exotic obstacle course every day that didn't have much to do with spirituality. And somehow, as many people might deny this, but somehow in Mysore I did feel that with the vinyasa, with the precision, with the respect, there was something more there. So anyway, Teresa and I decided to visit Mysore more regularly from that time, and we decided to go for 3 months every year. That was kind of the norm at the time for committed students. So from that first time when we went back again for the 3 months, maybe it was because we signed up for 3 months, or maybe it was a change of my attitude, but something strange happened, and really inexplicable. Almost from the first day, after being stuck on primary series every other time I'd met him, and also when he came to Goa, I'd only been allowed to do primary series with him. And then suddenly he let me go through the whole intermediate, and I remember I kept looking up and asking him, like, can I do another one? And he just looked and shook his head from side to side, and I did another one, and I carried on. And the first week I got the whole intermediate series. It was just bizarre. And he said, after one practice, I remember, and all this stuff, as all of you have these memories, I remember like it was yesterday, And he said, you come to class Sunday, intermediate series. I thought, that is really, really bizarre. Not expected whatsoever. And of course, utter trepidation about going to that lead intermediate class. I've never felt so much pressure and fear in my life. And again, it wasn't really engendered by him. It was just the circumstances really of Mysore. So it was an unusual precedent to go through the whole of the intermediate kind of in one go, really. And people noticed that. And I think there was maybe a little bit of envy or jealousy attached to me and looking at what I was doing. Well, maybe I wasn't really meant to be going through that quickly. But anyway, I did. It surprised me really really a lot. On the other hand, everything changed when he saw I couldn't do Karandasana properly. You know, that one where you're doing pincher and you do the lotus legs and you lower down. And I couldn't do that. And one day he saw that, and I guess I'd been kind of fudging it. I'd been kind of going down as far as I could before I'd collapse onto the floor and coming straight up. So if you could imagine, kind of halfway down or a little bit further, and almost touching the knees, but not staying there and going straight up again. And one day he saw that, and he hadn't seen that, and he was letting me go through all the intermediate, of course. And he saw I wasn't coming up, and that was where he roundly announced I wouldn't get any more postures until I did that one properly. So the party was over there and then. He didn't take any postures off me either, which is strange. I thought maybe he would take me back to that point. But nevertheless, every day he was on my mat. At that time, somehow and all of you that have been there will know that there was this kind of sixth sense he has, that when you're on your posture of difficulty, he's there. Somehow he's there. In all the people in the room, he knows and finds you at that point of time. So he was there at that time. Every day. And the first 3 months, he would stand on the end of my mat and look at me, and I would go down and collapse. And yeah, it was a difficult time. But the first 3 months stay, I just couldn't get it. I couldn't come up. Yeah, I always felt like in my normal practice outside Mysore, I just felt my body, I had this narrative going on. My body won't do that. I'm not strong. I'm not kind of strong guy. I'm a flexible one, but not a strong guy. And I don't have the capacity to do something like that. That's not me. That's not what my body does. So I'd kind of, I'd always kind of been skipping over it, just assuming that the absolute blockage, let's say. So nevertheless, not wanting to disappoint you, Sharath, I went home after every failure in the class, and I practiced the posture until my elbows bled, as much as I had to plaster up the raw skin not to bleed in front of you in the class, get blood everywhere. But after 3 months, I could almost do it, and the next time I came back, I could do it. So I started believing there was an unusual quality in the teaching relationship with you that I had. And I think, for many people, again, was it the person, was it the man, or was it just he was a vessel of so much commitment through everyone, or maybe a bit of both, And I do think there was something particular and special about him, to be able to hold that space and just to be able to recognize people's practices and remember them and always be there. And yeah, it was unique. I mean, another anecdote I'll tell you that I didn't write it down is that one day, I think the second or third trip I came back to Mysore. After the first week of primary, you're meant to do, you go into your series of choice, how far you've gone. And I gave myself an extra posture just to see if he'd notice, just to see if he really did notice where I was at. Straight away, he said, "Have you done that one before?" Yeah, he knew straight away. And it wasn't like a big one. It wasn't like one of the so-called gatekeepers. It was a little one that, wasn't a big deal, one that you could do in the advanced series. If you know it, it's Paripurna Matsindrasana. After all the arm bounces, I just gave myself that extra one. And straight away, he knew it. I said, of course, yeah, I've done that with you last year. And he didn't say anything. But I knew, and he knew I hadn't done that one before. I think there was this whole ability to change one's narrative because there was so much kind of pressure in that room and that he conducted. He changed the narrative I had about my own body, which I don't think any other amount of, if there was any less pressure, that could be done. And it was a kind of tough love that he taught me in, and he taught some of us in. But it worked with me. And also, it was different with each person. He didn't push everyone the same way. And some people he was completely soft with and very different. It just depended. It depended on you, really. And he matched your spirit, in a very unusual capacity to read and adapt to different individuals. And of course, just all the other stuff, even just remembering people's names every time. Anyway, it seemed I started to recognize the benefit in the kind of stricture that you taught us with, Sharath. And consequentially, you started then to show an interest in me because I kind of understood the point by then. I kind of was getting the idea of the whole thing. And so I went back to London and I set up a Mysore program as you wanted us all to do at that time to teach where we lived, in a Mysore program. So I set up a Mysore in my hometown of London. We moved back to the UK. I was in London. And and I started doing that, teach for 9 months, go back in the winter time for 3 months a year. And it was really, with no uncertain terms, more than a lifestyle. It was a community. It was a lifestyle in the deepest sense of it. It was really a life commitment that we had, and we gave everything to reason right to that. You had to make many sacrifices to teach and to have a way that you could get back every year, and to financial commitment, and not to, a certain sense, put down too many roots where you lived, because every year you'd go back for 3 months. It was on our part, a lot of sacrifice, and we believed in it, absolutely. And we believed in Sharath as the figurehead for what we were doing at that time. I mean, I didn't stay that way in my mind forever, but for many years, that was certainly the case. Anyway, I'll get back to that in a second. So I believe it was the second time that you just had started having assistants, Sharath, and I'd help you in the room as one of the first ones. He'd asked me to help. He asked Teresa as well, but she said she didn't teach, and he didn't pressure her to come and assist at all. He was fine with that. But anyway, I did teach, and he asked me to come, and it was a big step, because before that, Westerners had never been allowed to teach in their room. So you asked me, and on the first day, somehow I turned up half an hour late. I got the time wrong. I guess, I don't know, it's one of those cases, it's like such a serious thing. You've got to be on time, and somehow it's exactly the time that you fuck up. Excuse me. So I walked in half an hour late, and I remember he was sitting on the chair in front of the stage, as he always did, and he turned, he looked at the clock that hung above the door, that clock, the one that was on Charlotte time, 15 minutes early. He looked at that, he looked at me, he didn't say anything. I didn't turn up late again. But he wasn't really mad, even though time was really important to him, and he was very specific about time. If you turned up late, he wasn't happy with that. He wanted everyone at their times, so he knew where everyone was. It was almost like a game of chess. If you arrived at your time, he'd kind of know how to slot you into the class. Timing was really, really particular to him. But he didn't get mad, and I really I don't think I ever saw him really angry at all. He was stern. He was stern many times, but I don't remember anger. And there were lots of reasons every day why he might have been irritated or even angry, because there was a lot of crazy behaviour in Mysore. If you've ever been there, you know what I mean. Crazy behaviour in terms of asana, and just crazy behaviour generally outside and inside the room. So it was surprisingly lighthearted and funny, really, most of the time. Just especially because of the pressure that he had on him. Just very, very relaxed, really. And I remember one time assisting you, Sharath, and you running to the bathroom one day, and you were laughing and saying that last night you'd eaten out in the mall of Mysore, so he had what we call in Indian parlance loose motions. He was running in and out of the toilet. He was laughing about it. So it was, many people say with assisting him, he did get a bit of a relationship, and he did, he was very specific about what he wanted you to do there, but he was also, pretty chilled out with you. But one thing I never understood, and I never understood with you, Sharath, was your insistence on catching. It was a real confusion to me, and I remember very specific. I'd make the bigger, stiffer guys, make them catch, make sure they catch, and I felt conflicted. I didn't really want to do that, but he wanted me to do that. And that was a real difficulty for me with Mysore. My main difficulty, to be honest, with the Mysore narrative, and Sharath's teaching of that, I suppose. Still, much of our relationship was a kind of a bit of awkward, a little bit strange, and I wanted recognition, like so many of us wanted recognition. I was also roundly in awe of Sharath, really, but it wasn't really his thing to have people in awe of him. And so, it was like many of us, a kind of somewhat an unfinished business kind of feeling. And he never seemed particularly impressed with me, and I didn't really know how to make him more impressed with me. So I remember when I first completed Advanced A series on my third and really last proper trip, and on the last day, he gave me the final posture. But then when I went to him in the office to say goodbye, he simply told me many things not correct in what you're doing. And that was really it. So, it's a mixed, I'm not saying that was wrong to say that whatsoever, but there's many emotions I think many of us have had around our experience, which I kind of now feel I'm trying to reconcile once again, at this point in time. Because that was almost the last time we talked, really. And the last time was when he came to London for a week. It's a workshop with Hamish Hendry in London, and I was in London. And I did touch his feet at that time, like I'd seen other people doing, but it didn't really work. It just wasn't our relationship. It didn't feel right, and I kind of felt he knew it. Our relationship was slightly more economical. It was mainly based on him asking me whether Teresa was she okay if she didn't come to practice. It was like he'd know everyone that didn't come. Where's Teresa? I say she's not well or something. Well, generally she did come, but whenever she didn't, he would ask. And then sometimes he'd point out different flaws, like he did with all of us. There was many times I remember him saying good. I think the only time I thought I was surprised him was where there's a posture called Gandhabari-dasana, where you're in a kind of backbend and you pull the legs over the head and put them on the floor. And he said to do that one, and I did it straight away without any hesitation or without any need for assistance. And I think maybe that was the one point he was surprised by me. Other than that, it was generally point your toe, catch here, straight your leg, lift up. But there was a few that, within that, there was a few good instructions that I remember from today to today. It was a different way of teaching, but there were, if you listen carefully, it wasn't technique free. It was less about technique, but there were some good little pointers there. Yeah, and the other time I remember I almost impressed him was when Lakshmish, we did the chanting with Lakshmish, and probably many of you know that as well. And Lakshmi seemed to see that I was chanting by memory, like I wasn't looking down at the paper, I just knew the chants. And so he mentioned that to Sharath. So one year when we were in the office saying goodbye to him, it was mainly the only time we came to say goodbye, hello and goodbye to the office. Many people went there quite a lot to ask questions, but I was kind of really too, to be honest, I think I pretended otherwise, but I was really too in awe to go and talk to him, so I'd just say hi and bye, and I thought, I didn't want to bother him kind of thing. But anyway, he asked me, he said, I've heard that you like the chanting and you've memorized these chants. And I said, yes, I have memorized some of them. I like it. Yeah. And he gave me a chant. He said, what about that one? I can't remember the name of it, the chant. He said, say that one. And my mind went blank, of course. My one chance, it was like that one chance, and I fluffed it. My mind went blank. And I knew it, that's the thing. And then he chanted it back to me, the one that I hadn't managed to remember. And that was the one that I chanted regularly. So frustrating. That's my one chance to impress him. Anyway, it seemed often the case when in front of Sharath, you did these, you kind of did these little mind goes blank kind of situations. I remember waiting on the steps outside the Shala before lead intermediate, just like, absolutely racked with fear, because there was only about 20 or 30 of us at that time. It was very much a pressure cooker. And again, I don't think it was necessarily done, by him on purpose. It just was the way it was. And people often say, well, it's just all this ego in the Charlotte, everyone practicing and competing with each other. But, it really does something when you're there with your own ego, and amongst all these other people with theirs, and the kind of pressure you put on yourself to perform. It's interesting. And not totally irrelevant whatsoever to say it has a spiritual dimension to it is totally appropriate, because you really see what's going on with you. And those classes were very tense, let's say. I wouldn't wish to maybe go over and do them again. Anyway, they were very profound, and the memories, as maybe you can tell from this little monologue, are still there, very, 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 very pertinent and present. Looking back, there's so many experiences I had that were simply just kind of indescribable, and there was a presence of Sharath and a presence of us all there, to be honest, the whole community that drew things out of me that I don't think I could ever have done on my own. I don't think that my practice would have ever developed on with any, and to be honest, although Mark Darby is my Western teacher, with any Western teacher on my own without Sharath being there, although I didn't learn technique for the most part with Sharath, I don't think that I would be here today doing what I'm doing without that time there. And maybe that's just that, again, like I've said before, just that holding of space. He did so well, that holding of space for people, because as much as there was rigidity and stricture around it a little bit, like you could stop there if you can't do this, or, catch this or take that, he did give options, and he did allow a lot of people to do a lot of things that were kind of crazy and didn't say a thing. Yeah. So it wasn't like, he didn't give people space. Like there was a lot of space holding there for people to kind of work out their own stuff, or modify as they needed. It was only some of us that needed that stricture that he would give that. I remember one person who was probably the best asana practitioner I'd ever seen practice in Mysore. No names. You might know your name if listening. And every time he would do the posture perfectly, and every time Sharath would stand there shaking his head, no good. That kind of thing. I didn't say no good, but he was just having this guy on because the guy was absolutely picture perfect. But it stopped him every time. It's kind of like as if trying to kind of say, look, there's something to look at here, because I'm sure at that point there was a definite ego with this guy as well, because he just had that ability. It was a bit of a joke, really. He wouldn't let this person go forward for so long, and yet he was really a kind of virtuoso at asana. Anyway, in recent years, I've felt conflicted, as with many people, I think, and I felt I had unfinished business. Again, I think that many people feel the same. I wasn't planning to go back, I suppose, but I lacked a clear resolution of all the experiences and what Sharath stands for now, or at least what people make him stand for, because that's half of it. I think, the pressure and everything that was put upon him was our pressure that was put upon him. Yeah. And more recently, as I've become somewhat popular on social media, I felt looking at the experiences in Mysore objectively as I can, and with a critiquing eye for better and worse. I've also felt conflicted because I had a great experience with Mysore and Sharath, and so I've never spoke ill never spoke ill of you, Sharath. Did you ever notice that? I hope you didn't read my post, really. But I never said a word against you, just some of the logistical things generally in Mysore. And despite all the pressure that built up around you and the adulation, everyone wanting something from you. So I never considered you to be my guru. I was always really impressed with you and the way you held up, amongst everything. I did criticize Mysore and I felt bad for that. And some of the rules and the things went on there, like the catching, for example. But I always try to be respectful because I felt gratitude for the help and the kindness that you did show me. And I hope you didn't read anything I wrote, nevertheless. But I didn't like the size of the new place and the blown up photos of you on the wall. And the whole Param Guru thing I didn't really like. It was strange. But I still wouldn't mention any of that overtly. But I wasn't sure about the direction things were going. But more recently, from some of the pragmatic changes I heard you were making in the Mysore room and the consent cards and other leniencies allowing people to practice in different ways. And of course, with the active series, I felt hopeful again. I felt like there was more space around that. I feel you've had a hard life for many years, having to stand by and watch your grandfather's inappropriate behaviour and trying to say something in vain because it wasn't your position to, really. But he did try and say to his grandfather many times, I know. But he also had great reverence for Patari Jois. And when he died, and all the adulation passed to you, Sharath, that weighed heavy. And I saw you age quickly. And imagined you trapped in the house all that time and not wanting to go out necessarily and face the students, but also the locals, and all the pressure from the locals and your fame there. It was a kind of golden cage in a way in Mysore. And I felt for you again when the Me Too stuff came out. In a sense, I did, as much as I fully agreed, fully endorsed, was behind the Me Too movement. I still felt sorry because the memory of his grandfather for him, I know he felt in high esteem, and he did put out a statement briefly in agreement with it because I know he also did agree with it. But nevertheless, there's a lot of conflict there because Patari Jois was, after all, an important figure in his life and his teacher, his guru. So finally, I wonder deep down what you really made of it all. What did you really make of it all? What you thought of lifting and dropping back so many sweaty Westerners, crazy ones, us, every day, for so many years. And they're pushing and striving for postures. And you were fully aware it led nowhere in the end. You'd done them all. And they'd only broken you, really, as your grandfather had pushed you the hardest of everyone. Had to make you the best, had to make you the representative to cement the family legacy. And it had broken you. And yet you carried on. I wonder if you made peace with it all, inside. You seemed to cope, in the light of everything, incredibly well. But I wonder what was going on the inside. And I hope you're okay. I hope you're at peace now, regardless. Thank you for listening. It's been a very emotional podcast, and I hope that some of it has allowed you to also connect with that memory. And I hope it's been of some use to you in healing and reconciling yourself to the memory of Sharath. Let's leave it there today, and hope you join me for next week for a slightly more upbeat podcast. I'll never forget you, but I do think we have to move on together, and I hope the community can get behind each other and support each other now and in the future going forward. Let's see where it takes us. Gone but not forgotten, Sharath Jois. Thank you for everything.